Who do you trust to leave more money in your pockets? The answer is certainly not Justin Trudeau. In 2015, Justin Trudeau promised to help the middle class, but for 4 years, 80% of the middle class have been paying more taxes, and the deficits continue to go up every year. Life has become more difficult under Justin Trudeau. The answer is the Conservative Party of Canada. A Conservative government will live according to its means, and we have already announced a number of measures that will make life more affordable for all Canadians. For example, we will create a tax cut for everyone, allowing a couple with average income to save $860. We will remove HST on energy bills, reduce taxes on maternity and parental benefits, leaving up to $4,000 in parents' pockets. We will increase the age credit, which will benefit low-income seniors and give a couple up to $300. In addition, the cost of living is important, but there are other issues that are equally important. Immigration is one of them. And there again, Justin Trudeau has really disappointed Canadians. Here we are at the illegal crossing that is the most used these days. Some 50,000 people entered illegally into Canada from the United States at this crossing, and the vast majority of them went through here. If we are elected on October 21st, we will eliminate that flaw and put an end to this illegal entry point. And Justin Trudeau is not only incapable of controlling our borders, but he has even lost the trace of thousands of people who are waiting for deportation. Of course, our country is not subject to the same migratory pressures as some other countries in the world. But the fact is that there is a crisis of confidence when it comes to our immigration system, and Justin Trudeau seems to be moving in the wrong direction to resolve that problem. In 4 years, the federal Liberals cancelled the progress made by the Conservative government previously when it comes to strengthening the immigration system, fast-tracking application processing. And this is part of the poor image Justin Trudeau has given our country around the world. Tens of thousands of people from every region of the world came here in recent years. 60 per day this summer. Because of the incompetence and the negligence of the Trudeau Liberals, the majority of Canadians now have a negative impression of immigration. They doubt the fairness of our system, and they are questioning the control of our borders. Furthermore, Canadians don't like to see people crossing our border illegally, as is happening here, while others who follow the normal process are subject to long delays. Canadians especially want the immigration system to be managed competently and that their safety be secured. As Prime Minister, I will make those goals a priority in our immigration policy. As I said earlier, we will put an end to the wave of illegal entries into the country by cancelling the Safe Third Country Agreement with the United States. We will also provide additional money to the Canada Border Safety Agency, and the Immigration Agency will be here at the border checking entries. We will pay special attention to individuals who could be members of criminal organizations. We will also set immigration levels every single year based on Canada's needs. Those levels will also have to reflect our ability to correctly welcome humanitarian refugees. And our government will give priority to economic immigration, because a vigilant immigration system does not mean we can't be generous to economic immigrants or others who are fleeing difficult situations. We will improve the recognition of foreign credentials and help new Canadians with recognized skills to actually practice them. We are all losers when engineers and doctors cannot exercise their profession. I want to give people coming to Canada as workers, skilled workers, a way to become permanent residents with adequate wages and housing. I will foster family reunification and ensure that our system gives priority to those facing persecution. We will also expedite the processing of applications from people fleeing genocide. We want to also foster sponsorship of refugees because it provides better results for these individuals.
In the immigration system, the rules have to be followed and the laws have to be enforced. As Prime Minister, that's exactly what I will do. As I said, we will close the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. We will also hire 250 additional officers at the Canada Border Services Agency. This represents a 25% increase in our inland enforcement operation, which will strengthen law enforcement at the border. And we will deploy more judges of the Immigration and Refugee Board to the hotspots of illegal border crossers so claims can be processed faster. We will also closely monitor those considered to be a threat for criminality, especially MS-13 gang members. We will establish immigration levels every year according to Canada's national and economic interests, nothing else. And my government will prioritize economic immigration. But a more vigilant immigration policy does not mean turning a blind eye to refugees fleeing violence and persecution abroad. Quite the opposite. As Prime Minister, I will improve foreign credentials recognition and help new Canadians with recognized skills to put them into practice. I will give those who enter Canada as low-skilled workers a path to permanent residency with adequate wages and salaries. I will also facilitate family reunification. And I will ensure that our system gives priority to those who face persecution or civil war. We will also accelerate the reunification of genocide survivors already settled in Canada, and we will do more to promote the private sponsorship of refugees. Because we can do more for the most vulnerable if the government gets out of the way and works to better enable and support private sponsoring organizations. The government's own data shows that even more than a decade after they arrive, privately sponsored refugees earn more and depend less on government than those who came through government sponsorship. As Prime Minister, I will maintain the policy of open federalism brought in by the previous government. I will be working with the provinces on immigration, particularly the province of Quebec. As the only majority francophone province, Quebecers rightly grant a lot of importance to the linguistic profile of people who want to live in Quebec. Premier Legault wants to have more control over the selection of people wanting to immigrate to Quebec. I will be receiving those requests with an open mind. I will also recognize that it is in Quebec that the majority of illegal entries are occurring, and particularly in the location where we are now. We will also establish an effective mechanism of collaboration with the provinces and territories in order to share the best possible information about jobs available in the various markets. I also will help to establish economic immigrants in rural communities. And we will ensure that people who do settle in northern and rural regions will have the same access to services in English or in French, including the recognition of their credentials and services for all. The best way to resolve the situation at the
border is to elect a new Conservative government. It will take this situation seriously and show leadership in order to resolve it. The Bloc can only watch Justin Trudeau continue to do nothing, because the real priority of the Bloc is not to resolve problems that are important to Quebecers. The Bloc's priority is only to work with the Parti Québécois to realize sovereignty. I know that Quebecers want a government that will have the same priorities as they do, and it is this government that I want to give them on October 21st.
When it comes to immigration, the choice in this election is crystal clear. A re-elected Liberal government under Justin Trudeau that will continue to ignore this critical issue, driving down public support for immigration and costing taxpayers millions, possibly billions of dollars more as more and more people enter Canada illegally. Or a new Conservative government that will enforce the laws at our border, prioritize newcomers from violent and dangerous countries, and restore Canadians' faith in an immigration system that has served this country so well for so long. I've made my choice, and I believe Canadians will make the same choice on October 21st. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour, Monsieur Scheer, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada, you have just delivered an attack on the Bloc Québécois. Your candidates in Quebec are attacking the Bloc very seriously and have been for several days. Do you see there being a resurgence of the Bloc? Does that concern you as the Conservative Party and as a Canadian, and are you worried you will lose support in Quebec? Well, I'm confident that Quebecers will have confidence in our party on October 21st, because it's clear that our priority is to make life more affordable and leave more money in the pockets of Quebecers. Mr. Blanchette's priority is to work with the Parti Québécois in order to achieve sovereignty. Quebecers made a choice last year. They chose a new government, and now it is time for a new federal government, which will strengthen the Quebec nation. Are you concerned? I'm confident that we will win the confidence of Quebecers. Are you ruling out the possibility of working or cooperating with the Bloc Québécois as of October 21st? Well, I am really focused on October 21st. I'm focused on ensuring that we can elect a large number of Quebec candidates, Conservative candidates. That's my focus.
Hi, Mr. Scheer. David Cochran with CBC News. We're not going to get your platform today. Tomorrow's debate day, so I don't think we're going to see it then. The advanced polling starts this weekend, and you've promised to release it by the time that happens. So are Canadians going to see your fully costed platform on Friday?
So I can assure you that Canadians will see our fully costed platform with plenty of time to make up their minds before they vote. And again, I will contrast. Even today, the Liberals have not released their platform. They claim to have released their platform, but their platform is not costed. And a platform without costing is not something that Canadians can have confidence in.
Okay, but you said earlier in this campaign, buy advanced polling. Is that still your position? That's this weekend. Are we going to see it this weekend?
As I said, when we put forward our platform, it will be fully costed. We've gone through the PBO process. They've looked at all our announcements. Canadians can look at it, see exactly where we're going to leave more money in their pockets. They're going to see how we're going to cut corporate welfare and foreign aid to pay for the tax cuts that will help Canadians get ahead, and they will have that information with plenty of time before they vote.
And just one final point on that. Will it have a fully detailed path to a balanced budget within 5 years? Will you show us your deficit targets and the spending reductions that have to be made to get there?
Absolutely, and we've already highlighted some of those measures, like cutting corporate welfare and reducing Canada's foreign aid budget by 25%. We don't believe that taxpayers' dollars should be going to highly profitable companies or being sent through foreign aid to relatively well-off countries. We're going to leave that money here at home in the pockets of Canadians. Yes,
we will show Canadians our path to a balanced budget, and we have already announced a number of measures, such as the cancellation of $1.5 billion in corporate subsidies and the cancellation of 25% of foreign aid.
Good morning, Mr. Scheer. Kevin Gallagher with CTV National News. I'd like you to comment on the Globe and Mail story today that says your campaign manager, the company he co-founded, has taken contracts to run ads for both the Conservative Party and for a large oil and gas lobby. Now, there's concerns that this could violate Elections Canada law. How can you reassure voters that your campaign is not in violation of new Elections Canada legal standards?
Well, quite the contrary. We actually have a ruling, a decision by Elections Canada that states that it's allowable for vendors to have contracts with two different advertisers.
During the last Parliament, your opposition, I should say, criticized Bill Morneau on more than one occasion for having a conflict of interest because of his handling of the financial portfolio and his family holdings. How can you assure Canadians that your campaign manager is not at a conflict of interest when the campaign he works for is paying a contract to a company he founded?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite clear. Our campaign manager has taken a leave and is not involved in the day-to-day decisions of that company. And again, as I mentioned, Elections Canada has already made a decision on this about the allowability, the permissibility of vendors having different contracts from different advertisers.
But is there not a conflict of interest, sir?
Not at all.
Because his company's financially benefiting from the party that he's running a campaigin for.
But as I said, not at all. He's taken a leave of absence during
He'll be back.
During the
A leave of
campaign
absence,
and prior to. Oui, non, parce que c'est clair que l'Élection
Yes, it's clear that Elections Canada has already made a ruling on this, and it is permissible for vendors to have contracts with a number of advertisers. And the director of our campaign took a leave of absence from his position.
Hi, Mr. Scheer, Tom Perry with CBC News. You're talking about renegotiating the Safe Third Country Agreement. You've got a government in Washington that is clamping down on refugees. What are you going to offer Donald Trump, the U.S. administration, to accept really more refugees? How do you get them to agree to renegotiating this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe it's in both countries' mutual benefit to have this situation resolved on a bilateral basis. That is our preferred option. We do believe that it is in both our countries' best interest. It does not serve people who are crossing into Canada, does not serve Canada, does not serve the United States well to have this type of situation. I am optimistic for that can be resolved as the original Safe Third Country Agreement was signed in the first place, and that is our preferred course of action. Of course, we will explore other options, but that is our first course of action.
What other options? I mean, it's your preferred option. What other options are there?
Well, we can apply the principles of the Safe Third Party Agreement at other points along the border as well.
Can you do that unilaterally?
Well, as I said, our preferred course of options to do this is to resolve this in partnership so that both countries can ensure that personal security, that the health and well-being of people coming through is resolved. But as I said, there are other options, there are other tools available to the government that we'll also be exploring, because at the end of the day, we have to restore Canadians' confidence on this issue. There are people in other countries who are now facing longer backlogs for applications because of this situation. And Justin Trudeau has done literally nothing over the past 2 years, more than 2 years, to resolve this issue.
En français?
Oui. Alors, notre avenue préférable,
our preferred avenue would be to make changes to the agreement between Canada and the U.S., but there are other options. We can apply the principles of that agreement at the border.
One more. Why are you mentioning S13 today?
Well, it's quite clear that when people come across the border, that it's difficult for law enforcement here to know exactly who they are. And we do know there are reports of people who have entered into Canada with criminal records or who have been identified as being members of criminal organizations. So we want to make sure that when people come into Canada, we are putting the safety and security of Canadians first. That is paramount. And people who have engaged in dangerous or violent activity in the past should not be in Canada.
Hi, Mr. Scheer. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. Harjit Sajjan, speaking in his capacity of Defense Minister, responding to the Global News story about the military looking to pay less into provincial health care for their members to use the system. He says that the provinces are taking advantage of the military by charging them out-of-province rates that are 2.5 to 3 times higher than people who live in the provinces, even though the military live in the provinces. Do you think it's fair for the provinces to be charging military members more than other people who live in the province?
What I don't think is fair is that quietly, on the just before an election, a change is made to this arrangement that significantly affects the ability for our veterans and our men and women in uniform to receive care. That is not fair. And to have this kind of cut that will have an impact not just on our men and women in uniform, but also on healthcare systems in provinces across the country. That is extremely unfair. And it's another example how Justin Trudeau is such a hypocrite, running around the country, raising the specter of cuts. But it's actually, the reality is his government is engaged in these types of cuts, cutting healthcare services to our men and women in uniform, to our armed forces personnel, and creating pressure on provincial healthcare departments.
But do you think that the provinces are ripping the military off? Is this a cash cow for them?
Look, I think it's important that the federal government live up to its obligations. When they enter into these types of arrangements, it's important for them to uphold it. And the fact of the matter is they are now creating increased pressure on provincial health departments and on the ability for armed forces personnel to receive the care they receive. That's unacceptable. Justin Trudeau has had $10.5 million for Omar Khadr. He has millions of dollars to fight our veterans in court. But when it comes to ensuring that our armed forces personnel have the ability to get the care that they need, he seems to be, he starts shortchanging them. That's hypocritical. That's unacceptable.
If you become Prime Minister, will you commit to increasing funding to military health services?
I am committed to ensuring that our armed forces personnel get the health care that they deserve, that they have the highest access to health care services across the country.
Bonjour, M. Scheer, Pierre Saint-Arnaud, Presse Canadienne.
Presse Canadienne.
Dans ce que vous annoncez aujourd'hui, vous
In
parlez
your announcement today, you're talking about adjusting immigration levels based on the country's needs. What is your position? Do you believe that immigration levels are too high? Are you saying we need to put an end to mass immigration like we're hearing from other leaders and candidates? Well, what I'm saying is that the levels must be based on our economic needs and our need to grow our population. For political reasons, I would not be in favor of proposing higher levels if they're not founded. So we want to arrive at a level based on data and information and based on the needs of our country. That's my message today. Yes, but I guess you believe that current levels are not right. No, I'm saying that in the future, Canadians can have confidence in the fact that our targets are evidence-based. My second question has to do with what you mentioned in terms of improving the recognition of foreign credentials. I'm a bit curious as to how, in concrete terms, you intend to do that, because this is a provincial responsibility and it also comes under the authority of many professional organizations. Well, it's true that they are under provincial jurisdiction, and I do respect provincial jurisdiction, but I believe it's important for a Prime Minister to work with the premiers, because where there's a labor shortage, the Prime Minister and the premiers all agree that that's a problem, especially if there are qualified professionals that can't actually exercise their profession. It's not good for the economy and it's not good for them. So I want to work with the premiers to find solutions that will allow them to do that. But exactly what are you going to do? Well, there are a lot of different ways. There are federal programs under the Immigration Department that could help the process of recognizing credentials. There are people who have to take exams and tests, and there are ways in which the federal government can assist the system in terms of recognizing credentials.
Bonjour, Monsieur Scheer, c'est Raphaël Pirot de la Presse.
La Presse,
Donc, il y a 200
there are
agents frontaliers qui vont être engagés.
200 new agents that will be hired, and judges as well that will be deployed here. Do we know how many judges, and will they be permanent positions? What form will this take? Well, when it comes to the judge positions, the idea is to resolve the problem in the short term. The goal is to resolve this situation once and for all. And after that, we will not need the same level, but we need those additional judges to get the process moving more quickly, because right now people come in and they wait months and months to even get to the first step of the process, and that's not acceptable. There's also the fact that you want to cut foreign aid
et aussi la taxe carbone,
and the carbon tax, which is intended to mitigate the effects of climate change. Do you not think it would be better to try and resolve the problem at the source and work with other countries, rather than trying to control the migratory flow here in Canada? Well, that's a very good question, because the key point of our announcement is eliminating 25% of foreign aid, because 25% of foreign aid goes to countries that have high incomes. We also want to give more money to the poor countries, so it's through investments in international development in those countries that deserve it most, that we can resolve the problem at the source. But even if we do that, it's important to realize that if this situation continues, people will continue to come into Canada illegally, and it will be endless. So yes, we can work in other countries, but for Canadians and taxpayers, the priority is to resolve the problem at the border.
So that's a very good question. It allows me to further highlight our announcement on foreign aid spending. What we said is that we will cut 25% of the foreign aid budget. But in addition to that, by refocusing away from countries that are relatively well off, that have relatively high income levels and development levels, we are going to repurpose some of that funding precisely into countries that are facing humanitarian crises or have extreme levels of poverty. That will, of course, alleviate some of the pressure by improving living conditions in countries where people are currently leaving to come to Canada. But we must realize that even with increased development aid, the only way to stop this problem is to stop the flow of illegal border crossings right here at the border. And that is why this announcement also contains a focus on ending the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement.
Andy Blatchford, Canadian Press. Sir, you've said Canada's relationship with China needs a reset, but you haven't given details. Which specific steps would you take to reset the relationship, and would that involve asking for a meeting with President Xi?
Mm-hmm. Well, everything we do with the government of China right now must be done within the backdrop of two Canadians who are being held in extremely difficult conditions, who are being detained without any justification. That will be that will be what guides me in my relationship with the government of China. I have already called for the government, and as Prime Minister, I will send the signal to the government of China that we will stand up for ourselves by pulling funding from the Asian Infrastructure Bank. I called on the government to send a complaint on the trade file to the WTO much earlier. They took 9 months. I would never have waited that long, and I will proceed with that aggressively. I've also called for increased inspections on Chinese imports coming into Canada, which would have the dual goal of sending the government of China a message, but also allowing Canadian Border Services agencies to crack down on things like fentanyl coming into our community. So those are some of the measures I've said that would send a signal to the government of China that we're going to take this situation seriously. We're going to stand up for Canadians and Canadians' interests.
And on the part about President Xi?
Well, if there is a sign that he is willing to live up to international standards of justice, and that a meeting would help facilitate that, of course that would be something that I would be interested in. But it must be done not just for optics, it must be done with a view to getting those two Canadians released.
Would you en français, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, mais c'est une opportunité d'avoir
yes, it's an opportunity to find a resolution if that can really help the situation for the Canadians, but not just for appearance's sake. My primary goal
rendre les deux Canadiens qui sont au courant à ce moment emprisonnés par le gouvernement de Chine. Je vais travailler sur le liberté.
Is to work on freeing the two Canadians currently in prison.
Saudi Arabia, even after the Khashoggi killing and concerns about Canadian-made military vehicles, and how would you go about it?
Well, I'm always very concerned by the abuse of human rights in Saudi Arabia. I believe the best thing we can do to show the government of Saudi Arabia that we take these things seriously is to stop buying things from Saudi Arabia. When Canadian consumers' dollars goes to Saudi Arabia, that does more to support that regime than anything else. And that is why part of the principle, part of the motivation behind our national energy corridor is precisely to get Canada off of foreign oil, and specifically Saudi oil that's coming into refineries in New Brunswick. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everyone.
So in English, I just want to say a bit about our arts and culture policy. I'm so pleased to be here today to make some points. Look, culture is part of our economy. Arts and culture contribute to the Canadian economy. Our artists, our screenwriters, our